baby, buzzing round your eyes. I'm a candy baby, buzzing round your eyes. Now we could make honey, babe. Let me come inside.
You know, with that kind of introduction and such a large crowd being in one place at one time, too bad I'm not running for mayor or something. I could do some damage here. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me. And when Bruce and Gary, I don't see Gary here yet, but he said he would be here, asked me if I would be interested in talking to the group about tapes in general, and I said, you know, it's kind of a tough subject. On top of that, there's so many sections of tape itself that I can talk about. I don't know how to start. So Bruce said, well, why don't you just tell them how you started liking tape and how you're playing the tape, and what about someone who's never had an experience to play some good quality music from tape media? How could they get started in this hobby? So well, maybe I could do that. And I also, well, maybe I could bring a lot of my recorders here. You know, there are some really weird ones or rare ones, and maybe I can do a show and tell like back in kindergarten or something. But the more I thought about it, it'd be just the best to just follow Bruce's advice and just talk to you how I got started and what it'll take for you to get into this hobby if you were already not into it. I see some faces who's already into it deep, and to maybe warn you, it's a disease. It's a bad disease. And unfortunately, it has no cure, but only periodic remedies. So you think this is great and you got to have it. Once you get over this hump, there's something better, always. So there's no such thing as end of tape journey. So with that, how did I get started and why am I doing this? I think it's probably pretty general for every audiophile, whether you're a digital person or pure analog playing LPs, or you always look for that best release or the one that sounds the best. And then I got thinking, what if you have access to the tape that made those LPs and CDs? Wouldn't that be wonderful? But as you know, that is not as possible. Or even think maybe 10, 20 years ago, to think about if you were able to get those master Abbey Road tape, and well, then you have to play on the tape that was recorded on either a Studer C37 or the A80 RC that Bruce likes. But that's, where do you even get started? So I had always had that desire to get to the ultimate source for music, which is, I guess, to be technical, if you had access to live feed from some recording studio where you can amplify and listen to in your room, that'd be the ideal thing, but you can't do that. So whatever they used, the tape machines or whatever the means to capture that event, and 2 tracks and normally 15 inches per second speed, that's kind of in the middle of the road. If I could play that home, I should be in heaven. That's got to be better than any digital, obviously, or any LP that I could buy. So, as you know, some of those LPs can get very expensive. Those are good recordings. And then, on top of that, to play those nice LPs, we're looking thousands probably, or tens of thousands in some of other friends, category of quality of playback LP system. So I did a lot of research. I've always liked tape because of my background as a closet case engineer. I studied double E as an undergraduate, but got wise and went to business and studied that instead, and in addition to it. But I've always had that aptitude of knowing the circuit, and it so happened all the world's best recorders, the peak was in the late 70s to early 80s. And the technology they used at the time is, I don't know if you are familiar with like TTL logic, or even very simple processor, like 8-bit processor, 16-bit processor. You're talking 64-bit and so forth nowadays, but back then that was huge, and that was what all the machineries and audio equipment were based on. And that's what I studied. And lo and behold, when I opened these things, that's what it has. So that's added. But what drove me to this was two factors. One, I would say the music part, knowing that there were companies that we will talk about a little bit later that had access to these original master tape, and they could make copies of that master tape, and I could buy them. Now, they weren't cheap, but I thought, wow, that's the best thing I've heard in a while. And then all of a sudden I realized there's a guy in North Van that I sort of knew were having this monstrosity and looked so good. I just flipped over. But at that time, that was a bit too much. You know, you can't start out with a Studer AA20. And when I did some research, there were a lot of options, such as what we call prosumer machines. And then there's semi-pro machines. Those were less expensive. And then there was this big real Studio Pro machine. So for my desire to get to the ultimate music source and trying to get closer to the technology or the material that made those LPs and CDs, I needed to do it. And the only experience I had in tapes and tape machines were like everybody else when I was a teenager and in college. Everybody in the dorm had these TX with the tapes running with the Doobie Brothers going back and forth. And the guys who was fortunate enough to have 3-head tape deck would feed the one channel back and do a sound on sound, and you phase it out. That was a thing. But I wasn't that rich, or actually I was very poor, so I had mere Akai, but that was good enough for me at the time. But time passed, and I was stupid to get rid of all my analog and jumped on that Perfect Sound forever and traded all my LPs for CDs. And you know, I guess everybody did that, some of it, most of you, so you could probably relate to it. So with that, I started looking for something better than Akai's and Pioneers. So I came to the realization, for practicality, you need to start out with a prosumer machine. And number one choice even today is probably Technics 1500 series. Now that one is good because although it was for consumer market, it had a capstan motor about this big, and it had 2-track 15-inch capabilities. And I guess some models had a 4-track as well, so you could play your pre-recorded tab as well as your 2-track tab. In most cases in the 70s, you would make a copy of your album or something to play it. But that was good enough. But the machine itself is still good. I think the magic to that machine is the head block itself. It uses what they call ISO tape pad that goes up and down and around. And I think it's originally designed by 3M company, but those Technics people really perfected it and made it very accessible. And that's another few machines that you could have bought from a catalog that you can remove the head block. All Pioneers and things, you have to unsolder and things to get the head block out. And that was very good. And the other avenue was maybe going to cheap pro world or semi-pro world by going to Tascam route. A Tascam 32, which I have one at home, is probably the lowest priced machines you could still get into. Only thing is that it only has one EQ, because if it's made for US market, it'll have what we call NAB EQ, If you find one from UK or Germany, it'll have IEC EQ. But it can be modified. But there's also some pro models that you can open the back and switch to IEC to NAB, and so, but still limited. And then another Tascam model that was quite inexpensive and readily available was BR20. It's a little bit more beefier than Tascam 32, and even those, most people saw those in radio stations because it was well made, and it was meant to run 24 hours and you can take views, but it really wasn't made for mastering studio per se, in my opinion. But lately, even those are hard to find, and I can talk about some companies that is building a business around this particular BR20 model. It's called UHA company. And earlier I talked about techniques. We have access to techniques very readily if you're willing to spend 5,000 to 7,000 or so from Polspo. There's a company called J Coder. Last time I visited him, he had about 70 of these techniques machines that he used to. First, he brings it back to normal technique specs, and later on he developed a way to improve the preamp section to sound better. Kind of work he's done on the side to increase the performance of those techniques model, and he really refinishes them cosmetically. So if you saw it, it's as beautiful. It's like new. You get from techniques when it was new, but you get this beautiful colors, red, and I used to have one that was 1968 Camaro yellow, sunburst yellow. It was beauty. Okay, so that's another option. And then there's a Studer and Reebok's model, the PR99 especially, or more to the consumer side of A77 or B77. Those models are very good, and they're also very well built, typical German/Swiss quality. And if you think about some of the tapes that Bruce had from David Wilson and all his Wilson tape that we loved, the LPs in the past, now you can do the download thanks to Bruce's work in transferring. Those original master tapes were actually recorded with Reebok's machine, I think. Yeah, so it can't be all that bad, right? So, but you can find those pretty readily too. And me personally, if you want to get started, the way I did was my very first tape recorder, semi-pro tape recorder I bought was Otari, another Japanese company. Otari called model MX5050 B22 or B23, or those are very good, and those are very cheap because there's so many of them out there. Any garage band or garage band wannabe would have one in the 80s and 70s. So they are plentiful, and also the price is very, very reasonable. You can get one, I would say $600 operational model to maybe $1,200 would be good. For B3 model that is still available, but still you can get that for less than $2,000. So it's just a good way to get started. And I like that one best because especially B2 2 model is an older one. It has 2-track record and playback head, but it also has 4-track playback head. What that means, some of your old pre-recorded tapes, Beach Boys and so on, whatnot, you can play those and get pretty decent sound out of Otaris, as well as other way of playing it. And I think the sound from the Otari B2 4-track is certainly better than Akai's and Pioneers. So then, like anything else, when the disease kind of gets going, Otari just doesn't look good or doesn't sound good anymore. So you want to get into the big boys arena. And so my very, very first recorder of pro kind I bought was from eBay, like And then the ad said it was from Corpus Christi, Texas. And the ad said, I remember as like yesterday, this recorder was only used to record Tex-Mex Christian music only on Sundays. And it's perfectly working and is ready for any, recording studios. And so I said, wow, you can't go wrong, Anybody records Christian, especially Tex-Mex Christian, can't be lying, how can you go wrong? So I jumped on it, and I paid hefty sum to buy it, and then I brought it, and it was console style, so I couldn't fit it in, so I had to take it apart. And thing about the Studers is that they have these manuals, service manuals for all models, from very early tape recorders like C37 on all the way down to the last tape recorder they ever made, this A827, this multi-track. All the manuals are online, it's free access. And I have to say that although it's German English, so it is not perfect in the way it's describing it, but you have to give those Germans credit, or Swiss the credit, of really covering from the theory to actual description of how each circuit is working, how it's supposed to work, and what to look for when it's not working, and so forth. So that really helped me to convert it to a portable, just like this one. This is A810. So console one would have this view meter section on the top. This would be laying down. This would be blocked. So this is the way I configured it. But when I turned it on, the description did not match the condition of the machine. First of all, the machine was stored. I'm sure it was well stored, but because of the time duration, it has number one thing wrong with these machines is it has a rechargeable battery. If you don't charge it, charge is gone in the first place, and secondly, it will start leaking. And when it leaks, it starts eating through the traces. So basically, your circuit's gone. And then, if it's that old, especially all the capacitors and other components kind of seen its better days. So it was a total mess. And at the time, I really didn't know anything about the tape recorders. So that must have been early 2000. So 2004 or 5. So about 6-7 years ago or so. So I did research, and there was one person in Seattle area, in Redmond studio, who was trained by the Studer factory in Swiss to be the authorized service person. So I said, well, my problem's solved. So I called him, and he was nice enough to bring it over. I'll fix it. So I brought it over to him, and that was like in February. Come November, I still did not have a working machine. I'm a patient guy, but it was a bit too much. It was Thanksgiving, I had nothing to thankful about the Studer. So I said, I think you did what you could. Just tell me how much I owe you, and then let me take it back. So I brought it home, and then I took it all apart and started the manual. Now I'm not going to say that's what you should do also, that you need to go download the manual and start memorizing or studying however all the circuit works. But that's how I got started. And once I got into it, it was very addictive, and also it was fun because I was in a relatively time-wise unique position to understand it better than most other people, especially when it came to the firmware and how to program it, how to change it. Whereas a lot of the even young techs, very brilliant, they know how to change a broken part and how to remove an IC chip and put a new one on, but when it comes down to the firmware and having to learn the code and being able to modify, that would be a bit tough. But I was a semi-dinosaur that I was lucky for a change, and I was able to understand it all. So after a long struggle that took about 6 months, I had it working completely. But in the process, I learned my appreciation for the amount of work it must went in designing a machine like this. Looks simple, sizes no bigger than Panasonic or Pioneer or Akai, and yet the technology and thought that went into it. Even every day I look at it, I get amazed, and that is good. So I bought the Studer A10, and then for a brief moment I got involved with a gentleman in Canada who also had Studer, but he also said very nice things about the Sony machines I never heard of. It's called Sony APR series 5002, 5003, and at the time he explained to me why I should get into Sony, and it made sense. Again, it was very well designed. Sony back then, they were at the top in the early 80s. And then he said it sounds as good as a Studer A80, which is, even at that time, I thought it was the top. So I had to have it. And then, with luck have it, I found two. Actually, I found three at a Walt Disney studio in Florida, and they hardly ever used it. And that's one of the things I was going to tell you where to look for, that I'll go over later, is that these machines came from Disney's video production area. So they were using it to support video, so they hardly used it. So head was perfect and everything was good. I got very lucky. So, and then I got into it, so I learned to appreciate it. And maybe good and bad about Sony model that you could also look at is that, first of all, when I bought it, it was in good situation. I paid pretty good money for it, but somehow later I learned it doesn't get respect from the marketplace. So for a while, you could buy these studio machines for as little as $600, maybe even less. Now, someone like Peter over there who can work on it, it's a good deal, but I wouldn't suggest you going there. Even if it's working well, my guess is that 2,000 range would be a perfect machine to get into that'll sound as good as anything, really. Sony is an excellent machine. The bad is that when I first got it, one of the things that I noticed is it is designed for post-production facility, which means if they finish the movie and wanted to do the audio track separately or whatever, or if you were making a lot of copies of the same thing, you're not really doing a critical listening from this machine. So the form factor or the noise wasn't a big deal. So the thing was noisy. It has a fan, and when I measured it, just standing about 1 feet away as if I were to really do something, it was approaching 80 plus dB. It was like helicopter taking off in a music room. So you can't have that for an audiophile. So I wanted to change the fans, and also friend Peter came with a new bracket where we could use a bigger fan that can move twice as much air, but you run it at half the speed, so you don't lose anything engineering-wise. But then again, noise has really gone down. It's whispering now. So if you ever run into one, we can help you to get that. And the other pro machines, it's kind of plentiful out there, but the price is kind of gone crazy, is Nagra machines. Probably many of you have seen those small Nagra 4s. Actually, Dr. Philip back there is a champion of those Nagra machines, that he did a lot of the live recordings of Seattle Wind Symphony with that, and it's a tremendous machines. But for audiophile, unless you can find this QGB, this adapter that can take 10-inch reel, you can only do 7-inch, so it's not very practical for audiophile use. For audiophile use, you have to move over to Nagra T Audio. Now this thing is a beauty. I think you've seen some on like the shows. Doc B at Bottlehead always uses at the trade show to demonstrate his tape project tapes with his tape tube repro preamp to make beautiful music for the shows. And I don't really recommend T audio because, first of all, it is very expensive now. When I bought mine, my first one, actually I had more than one, I had to admit, but it was very, very reasonable. It was owned by Glenn White, the world famous professor and a sound engineer who did the Beatles sound when 69 when they came to Seattle? 64. Close. 64. But anyway, I have this machine. It's a very well running machine. But if ever anything goes wrong, even I will struggle. So it's tough. And then there's only one person in this country who claims to be the real Niagara repair, and his minimum billing is $5,000 to check out your Niagara. And then parts and whatever he does to repair it is extra. But obviously he does good work, but it's costly. So that's why I say Niagara, unless it's running well, and you can go ahead and touch it and play it, it would not be my top choice. The other one is probably more rare and probably will not run into. It's called Lyric out of Denmark. They made a small portable machine called Frida, and it can take 10-inch reel, and it sounds good. It's a good machine, but there's not many of them around. And then even more rare is a model called TR55, and it's a beast. Very wide body. It has a plate about 1-inch thick aluminum plate they machined to mount everything on, so it's really solid. Again, I have not seen one other than 4 in my house, so that I would not recommend. The other option is the Ampex. There's Ampex 350 and Ampex 351. I have 351 and 350, but 351 is a good one that I would recommend, because once the transport is running, there isn't much to break down. It's like 1956 Chevy, Bel Air. It's all stick shift, and there's no smarts to speak of. He uses one of those microwave oven condenser as a capacitor, for a motor capacitor. It's a great machine. But what impressed me the most is that when you marry it with this original 351 preamp, it sounds awesome, especially when you play 60s or the early American recordings. Most of them were done in that way. That's very, very, very special sound, and I really do like it. My 351 came from, you probably know, Kearney Barton Studio. He passed away, I guess 2 years ago or so. And there's a famous photo of him in his studio. Literally, there's mountains of tapes and papers and everywhere. You can hardly see him. He would have made a good candidate for one of those arts and entertainment hoarders episode. He would have fit right in. But on the wall, you can see a equipment rack with a 351. That's the one I have. So there's some special, link to it. Too bad he passed away, but his niece felt that I deserved to buy that one from the estate, so she helped me get that. And at the same time, Peter helped me haul all the tapes that he had. All the good ones that was labeled went to UW for their archive. So I'm sure they were really good music, but all his outtakes and duplicates or things that he wasn't really careful with the labeling and all, it was about half a van full of tapes that I was able to get. And some of them are really treasures. So I still haven't gone through them all, but that's how it is. So I highly recommend Ampex 351. And another reason that would be a good choice for, especially lucky guys in Seattle area, is that Dave Dintenfest. He's probably the world's best Ampex guy. Only challenge for him is his delivery is pretty long, so you have to stand in line. And if you're willing to wait and want to get the best work done on an Ampex 351, Dave is the guy. And I think he's really famous and active in like Ampex forum, and many people around the world ask him for his opinion. So that's probably kind of rounds about what pro machines are available. Yes, Bruce?
What about the MCI machines being sold by Mara machines?
MCI machines is actually predecessor to the Sony APR machines that I talked to you about. Sony bought MCI, and some of their older machines, especially multi-track 16-track MCI machines, are still good, but it's old technology to say. I'd say it's close to Presto. Between Presto machines is another old one like Ampex and Presto, but below or not as well running as Sony machine. And the other thing is there's two guys that know the Sony machines and MCI machines well, but they're both retired, so it'd be very tough for them to work on that machine if there's something needed. So MCI left out, but MCI would be a good American made machine. That's a good one. So one thing to worry about these machines when you get into it is EQ. Now, all of you know when you buy an LP, there's only one EQ, RIAA, and around the world everybody uses that and everything's fine. The record you buy from Germany or China or Japan plays the same way as you would do it here. But tape's a little bit different. As you know, US is standardized on NAB, and it's a little bit more complex because it adjusts to many things in a way. And then in Europe, I think where the real tape started, with the German army and all that, but they settled on an IEC or CCIR EQ. I think most modern tape enthusiasts like myself or Bruce prefer IEC because theoretically it makes less adjustment to the original flat sound. So in a way, less chance for error. Because if you get the EQ wrong, maybe you're not listening the way the original recordist recorded that particular piece of music and listening to it with some addition or subtraction. But IEC is less chance of that. And also to me, it sounds a little bit better. I'm sure Bruce can talk some more about it in another occasion. But all the machines you can say that were made in US, they all have NAB and do not give you choice for IEC. Whereas some of the overseas machines, especially ones from Europe, will be all IEC, but a lot of them give you IEC NAB option. And well, I left out another good machine called Telefunken. I should have made a tour of my house before I made the list. Telefunken is also a good machine. M15, the ones I have is very good. I think M12 is also good. But it's a monster. It's really heavy. It takes two people to carry it. And if you get Telefunken directly from Germany, chances are you have to thread your tape with what they call oxide out. So that when you thread it, oxide is opposite of what this is in. This one is, oxide is facing inside. So that's an idiosyncrasy of Germans, that they did that. I guess theoretically that may make more sense to do that. However, Ampex, when American companies start making, they did it this way, so that's more of a norm now. So, and that's what goes. So, I would recommend, if you do get a machine, make sure you can do IEC. The other reason I would go for IEC is tapes like Tape Projects and all the other tapes that I'll tell you, 99% of them are on IEC EQ.
If I may throw out there, I have two Ataris and they both have IEC and NAB.
Oh, you're lucky.
So Atari.
Very good. Atari, yeah, Atari is good.
Reinforce
Right.
that brand
Yeah.
as being
From the front,
very
right?
adjustable.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. Is that MX5050? Probably it is.
Yeah, 5050 Mark III.
Threes.
And then MX70.
Okay. Yeah, those are both good machines. So, where do you buy these machines? That's another thing you need to know if you want to get into this tape thing. And I'm sure you're thinking the E word. eBay is still, fortunately or unfortunately, the most plentiful place to buy some of these studio recorders. And but preferably, all of my good machines came from recording studio or video production facilities. Two of the first Studio A80 Mark IIs, these are the big bathtub the washing machine type of machines that I bought, came from a studio in LA, in Burbank. And the guy did a lot of overdub work for commercials or even movies and whatever. And so it did not have many hours on it. So those are the really, really good find. And then if you get lucky when you scanned your Craigslist, you could see some people who had access to these recording studios and they're selling it. Now that's a good source as well. One time I bought a Studio A80 and then he said he has some more studios. I said, how did you get them? The guy was in New Jersey. And he said one day he was driving to Manhattan, was passing the CBS studio, and back of the dumpster, there were these Studio A80s stacked up. And there were only a couple of these portable type. The rest of them were all consorts. He couldn't take them, so he only had a pickup truck or some small vehicle. So he loaded the small units and removed all the casters from the big units. Then he was so happy he got those casters. They were nice casters, but I wish get him to think before he had no idea. And that's one point that I want to stress. When you buy these machines from eBay, 9 out of 10 times you will run into, I like to call them antique dealers and surplus sellers. And they will always have this term "as is" in their ad. That's the red flag in my opinion. That means it is either not working or will not work. Even if the guy said it's working, but he wants to sell it as is. It's a big time red flag. And some of the surplus people, they would go around the country. They buy entire studio, and then they take out the mixer, take out all the microphones, and they sell the small ones first, and then they will liquidate this one of the last things they liquidate is these recorders. Now those ones usually have a better chance of working and giving you good service, but they also know how much these things are worth, and they usually ask for a lot more than antique dealers or some person who used to have it in his garage or in a barn and happens to drag it out and sell it. So that it's another thing. And as I mentioned, the best luck I've had was the studios. I never had any luck in the local area studios, but mainly in New York and LA area. It seems like that's where all the master recorders are. But I did buy some Ampex ATR machines from Nashville also. For I guess it was only recorded country music on Sunday, so it was good. Yeah. So we're about 15 minutes away from the breaks, but still got a few more things to talk about. So I'd like to kind of briefly talk about average or normal audiophile subject of tweaks. You cannot leave a machine alone if you're a true audiophile. You got to do something to it, right? Even if you have to paint it differently. And I brought a Studio A10. It's a bit naked because I did bring a regular clean head with a cover and really nice, but I thought that's not special. Everybody in the neighborhood has that. but not many people will have a naked studio with the wires hanging out, so that's why I brought it. But as you can see, I am bypassing all the studio electronics audio-wise and just using it as like a turntable, just to transport, to move the tape as accurately as possible. But sending the signal from the head to a preamplifier. And so maybe after the break we can talk about, you know, what are the choices in preamplifiers, and there's a laundry list of preamplifiers now. We did not have that 5 years ago, but there's a big choices, including something you may have at home. You know, you've got to have more than one preamp, right, if you're a true audiophile. And you might want to look, especially if it's made in the 60s or 70s, early 70s, look at your input selector and see if there's an input called tape head. And if you're really lucky, like Philip, who has Marantz 7, and it not only has tape head input, it also has a frequency adjustment, so you can tame your frequency. Those people thought of everything back in 1960s. So that's probably what I'll talk about. Why don't we take a quick break and then restart?
Great.
Thank you.